Welcome back to this webinar, Body Speaking of Today, Bharatanatyam in a Contemporary Context. I'm sorry that we are late due to some technical problems, but I hope you are with us now. My name is Ulrika Larsen, and I'm the curator and producer of NAVA GATI Festival here in Stockholm. And this festival is held both online and on stage, to be able to bring in as many participators and viewers as possible during this this still ongoing pandemic, which is making it difficult still to invite the international guests to Sweden. I hope that will change within soon. A Movement in Exile is a platform for dance by Farhang Förening. And we are very happy to announce this first festival, which is highlighting dance somehow related to Indian classical dance and its practitioners, choreographers, and all interest in joining us in interesting conversations and to see performances and dance films. So once more, welcome. And I have here with me Pauline Reibell, and she's my co-moderator. She's also a panelist. And I just wanted to tell that it is possible to make comments, or rather to forward questions to the three different panelists through the live chat function on YouTube. And we will forward as many of these questions as possible towards the end of this program. Yes, I think I will start to introduce you, panelists, and I will start with Pauline Reibell, friend and collaborator and co-choreographer here in Stockholm, Sweden. And she's not only a choreographer and dancer, she's also a yoga instructor, yoga facilitator. And she has her training in Bharatanatyam, and which is the South Indian classical dance form. And she has also her education at Parts in contemporary dance. Not only that, you are also doing styles like tango, and you have performed buto, and also voice work is one of your practices, I believe. Pauline is drawn to forms that deepen her love for movement and search for truth and freedom. Indian classical dance, Argentine tango, contemporary dance, buto, and voice work. And moved by ancient rituals, drumming, improvisations, and symbols, the performative space is to her a celebration of interconnectedness, to explore what lies underneath polarities and doesn't belong to change. I have been working together with Pauline in several productions, and it is a pleasure to have you here. And it is a pleasure to have your premiere work, Margam, on Saturday. So you will see more of, if you are in Stockholm, that is. It is an on-stage event. But you will talk about it here. So welcome, Pauline.
Thank you.
Is it something you would like to add for this presentation?
It's already a lot.
Yeah.
Big.
So I will then welcome Seeta Patel, our second panelist today. And based in UK, she's a choreographer and dancer, filmmaker. Started her journey in Bharatanatyam dance at the age of 10, and later on becoming a full-time professional dancer. Seeta is passionate about creating work that enriches artistic conversations and explores different ways of seeing the world and approaching ideas. She uses her creativity to challenge othering for a more equitable society, socially conscientious action, discourse, and provocation to address wider global issues. And Seeta Patel Dance creates live stage performances focusing on classical Indian and contemporary dance and dance theatre. I first encountered with Seeta through her film, two different dance films, which was exposed at the Advocacy Dance Biennale in Bangalore in 2015. And I got very interested in her work, and especially in the way you are approaching Indian dance and the identity, the multiple identities for you as a dancer. It was in this film. So welcome, Seeta. Would you like to add something for this presentation for the audience?
No, I think you've included mostly what I'm doing. As I said before, when we had a technical issue, that it's strange to hear yourself talked about in that sort of disconnected way, but it's all part of a kind of ever-changing journey. So thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And you were able to watch her two dance films yesterday, Behind the Scenes, Rite of Spring, and also a very British museum. And we are screening the full version of Rite of Spring on Saturday at Teater Slava in Stockholm. So we will move on to the third panelist, Revanta Sarabai, from Ahmedabad and still based in Ahmedabad. And Revanta is a dancer, choreographer, and actor that forms the third generation of the legendary dance family after Mrinalini Sarabai and Malika Sarabai, both world-renowned artists. And having made his solo classical dance debut at the age of 8, Revanta's work has been showcased at prestigious festivals and venues across India, Europe, UK, and the US. And he's also an actor, has had many roles in Gujarati feature films, and is working, he's an experienced workshop trainer specializing in using aspects of movement and theater for training corporate employees. So I met Revanta back in 2015, also at the Advocacy Dance Biennale in Bangalore, and I was captivated by the way Revanta is using gesture in a new way, giving them new, fresh meanings somehow, and opens up the language of the hand gestures of Indian classical dance. So I invited him to Stockholm to show his work in progress at the time of Out of Bounds. And now we are very happy to have you back, Revanta, and you could see his performance Out of Bounds yesterday online. So welcome, Revanta.
Thank you.
Would you like to add something to this for the audience?
No, I think, yeah.
Okay. So, yes, we should go on with the subjects for today's webinar. And yeah, I will start. It is all about how we relate Indian classical dance to a contemporary context. It's a very broad topic, and I will try to break it down into separate parts. In the first part, I would like to address questions to the panelists regarding the technique, the source of new creations, innovations in the existing dance forms. And in the second part, I will focus a little more on the language of gestures, abhinaya, which is the narrative aspect of Indian dance, and how it can be used in different ways for a contemporary audience, both within and without, in India and outside of India, where the perception might be different. So to start with the word Indian classical dance, I got interested in the way that you, Sita, formed a comment somehow in a trailer I was watching, or in a teaser for The Art of Defining Me. That you prefer to use the word classical compared to traditional when you talk about Indian dance, or when you refer to what you do, I believe. And because the word tradition has a flavor of being not being equivalent and relevant today. And this is something that caught my interest, since I'm struggling myself with how we should title the dance form, which is so ancient somehow and has its roots in the temple of South India, and now is performed all over the world on stage mainly, but also in many different ways. And what do we call that kind of, when is it on the, I would like to stay a little with the definition of the classical word that I think you said, that it is more equivalent and somehow it is timeless and borderless. And that gives a denotion to the dance form, as if you would take it out of its context a little and make it living by itself. Am I right? Instead of putting a label that it is a tradition and it was performed in the temple by the Devadasis from the beginning, and how the development of the dance form continued. I would love to hear you comment on this, and what is your thought about the classical versus the tradition, Sita?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I think it's a really interesting question for me that I try and negotiate quite often, just for myself more than anything else. The reason I make a definition between traditional and classical is because I feel, lots of things have tradition embedded with them, but there's something around classical and classicism across art forms, whichever part of the world they're from, that remains evolutionary, that remains able to grow. And the growth is often sort of more refinement, more deeper, kind of whether that's been with ballet or Western classical music, or the introduction of amplification in Carnatic music, which changed the form of Carnatic music because just levels of sound can be modified, and so things can be balanced differently. So it can be more complex now. If you look at the history of ballet, it's not considered in the context and framing of the French courts anymore. It's moved on from there, yet it's still ballet. And I feel that there's something that for me it feels a little disingenuous to constantly refer it back to the temple for several reasons. I feel it's an art form that doesn't need to always be linked to religion, and I think that if that's a sort of alienating part of it for some people, or it's not a point of connection, I don't think it's something that should hinder you from exploring Bharatanatyam. Obviously, it's got origins in spirituality and Hinduism. Absolutely, it's not sort of deniable, but for me, it's about thinking how is it moved forward? What is the benefit of constantly anchoring it to something in our past? And actually, not even in a distant ancient past, actually a very recent past, if we think about it, in terms of the evolution of Bharatanatyam and partition in India, nationalism, and how all of that was caught up together. The form of Bharatanatyam we see today on our stages, it is moved on a lot. And so the people who often hold on to it with a sort of death grip in terms of tradition, I just don't know what purpose it serves to the form itself, because it was always evolutionary, right? Right when some people, the compositions which incorporated several different languages at a time, with Telugu, Tamil, Sanskrit, English, all within one composition. Those were things that demonstrate to me that it was evolutionary even a long time ago. And so to hold it back in a way that I don't think serves anything, rather than mining deeper within it, which is what I think happens within classical art forms, is that the exploration isn't necessarily external, but it's quite internal in many respects to kind of deepen its refinement, deepen its possibilities. And also, I think sometimes it's just about semantics, it's just about words. And for me, when I think of, let's just take England, for example, a traditional dance form would be Morris dancing. It wouldn't be ballet, right? And equally, we have our folk traditions in India, which I think feel more appropriate to call them tradition. It seems more rooted in community and in a way of life. Whereas I think a codified art form that is constantly sort of evolving and growing, it to me speaks of classicism that is beyond a Western construct of classicism alone. I think there are many things in the current times in modern dance, Graham technique, Cunningham, Larsen, notation, all of those things have internally in them a level of classicism, I think, that we don't apply because, we think of classical as ballet. And we think of classical music as Western classical music, but actually those traditions exist around the world, and there's something deeper that connects them than just the sort of aesthetics. And so for me, I'll stop talking in a minute, but for me, I feel like it makes more sense to present, for example, a classical festival, which includes classical art forms from around the world, rather than an Indian festival, which becomes a sort of cultural silo of a specific place. And I think that, especially working as an artist and being born and raised in the diaspora, I connect to it in a slightly different way, I think.
Thank you, Sita. It is very interesting to hear you speak of these terms. I am recognizing a lot, I'm a classical dancer myself in the Odissi dance form, and every day I think about, I refer to classical as well, since it is giving more, it opens up, as you say, for more definitions of what it can be, what it has been, because it is continuous development.
I just like to make one point here, though, very quickly, is that I am fully kind of conscious and conscientious of the fact that Bharatanatyam has quite a tumultuous history around sort of disenfranchisement of the original hereditary dancers, and that journey is something that's being spoken of a lot more now. And there are some, really valid and important voices that, like Nritya Pillai and others such, who as a Bharatanatyam dancer who is a recipient of this art form that has actually caused a disenfranchisement of quite a lot of people, I have to come to terms with that in many ways about how I think about it. And I know that classical has the part of the word which is class, and there is something in there that also doesn't completely sit right with me. Maybe there's a new word that can come out, but because class is about elitism, and there is a lot of elitism within Bharatanatyam, as there is with a lot of classical art forms. And so these are things I'm constantly trying to negotiate. I don't mean to use the term classical to exacerbate the class issue. Mm-hmm. I think I'm thinking of it more in terms of its inherent DNA that grows and evolves and refines itself in many respects.
Yes. I think I understand your point there, Sita. And would you like to add something, the other panelists? What is your thoughts about these definitions? How do you refer to Bharatanatyam? Does anyone want to give your thoughts about that?
I think I agree very much with what Sita has said. I also think that in India, sometimes those two terms overlap quite a bit. So sometimes classical and traditional are sometimes the same thing, but not always the same thing. And I think it's perhaps part of semantics that people just interchange the two words without really thinking about it. And I think when we look at Indian classical dances on a world stage and across the diaspora, that is when these terms really start to kind of have more and different meanings, much more so perhaps than in the kind of older context within India.
Yes. Pauline, are you?
Yeah, it's try to ponder over it, but I see the classical Indian dance as a kind of a spine. Also, it has a spine, and of course, as you said, Sita, there is an evolution within it. It's kind of spiraling and embracing other influences, and with the time, so it's not frozen in time. And in that sense, I agree with the tradition is more like something that is from the past. So that there is this element that resonates. Yeah,
I think we have to. I think we have to remember that all dance forms actually are constantly in evolution somehow, and it is not just the one rooted in. All dance are rooted somewhere, and it is just a way of defining them, I believe. It is interesting to hear your words on this, especially since we are keeping this festival from a platform in Sweden where Indian dance, if you just say the name of Indian dance, it can refer to Bollywood dance. It is very broad. And the reason why I still, because I am fighting with this with myself, what should I call a festival? I want to promote artists from the diaspora, from India, from national artists who are working within these techniques and within these questions about development, innovations, and whatever the work is about or where it is derived from, but has a relation to dance dance within the techniques somehow of the different forms of Indian classical dance. And I chose the word Contemporary Indian Dance Festival since it is still needed here. If I call it just a dance festival, it will be, I need to point out that, hey, we have wonderful artists from India, from all over the world who are actually, who we don't see here. That's this thing that I want to highlight. So we'll see what is the word for the next NAVA GATI. Thank you for this. Yes, I am also Bharatanatyam, you could say it's a very elevated form of art in which the rhythmical mistakes or the ugliness or the defects in any forms are maybe not always accepted. I found being in this context myself for many years. And I was thinking that one definition of what is happening today would be that we allow this to be shown, to be seen, the defects, the deformed, and the flaws, the not perfect. And I think, Revanta, in the teaser for Out of Bounds, you make that very clear in these words. I will quote from the teaser. What happens when the body of a classical dancer is being deformed, when it is made not beautiful, when it is being broken down, but it is still moving forward? And I would love you to explain a little more the definition of what is the non-beautiful, because this is speaking to me very directly. I'm very interested in the non-beauty of forms that are usually seen in a very aesthetic and very harmonious presentation. Could you share some thoughts about that? Maybe relating to the work. Thank you.
I think having studied Bharatanatyam as a classical form from such an early age, and having spent most of my life continuing my training in the classical dance form, something that is always kind of pushed upon you is, as a young dancer, is the need to be presentable, is the need to constantly project a certain beauty and a neutral smiling face to the audience. And there is very much this sense of the decorated body, which is presented in the traditional presentation of the classical dance form, that is Bharatanatyam. And I think for me, through this piece, and perhaps in the years leading up to creating this piece, one of my interests was, in some senses, what Sita mentioned, was to try and find a way to the core of the Bharatanatyam body, and to try and go deeper beyond the sort of visual facade, which is what we are taught to present to the audience, which is usually always meant to be beautiful and decorated, like I said, and to try and get closer to its core. And so, for example, one of the first things that I did for this piece was to completely strip it of not just the costume and the makeup and all of that, which is part of the decoration, but also its very frontal nature. And so in attempting to kind of explore the physical form of Bharatanatyam, I started experimenting with cutting out that very frontal nature and putting dancers on the floor, let's say, lying on the floor, but still doing exactly the same movements as best as possible as you would learn in a classical, in the classical format. And just this change of perspective, both for the dancer, but also from the point of view of the audience, which is that, you, again, in the traditional classical form, you never see the kind of the top of the dancer, or you never see a dancer doing certain movements from the back, because it is a very frontal thing. And even the movements where a dancer turns are very specifically choreographed, so that when the dancer is turning, it is a kind of a created movement which is meant to be seen from a certain perspective when the dancer is turning, let's say, or when the dancer is retreating to the back of the stage and so on. And I wanted to really change the perspective of from the dancer's point of view as well as from the audience's point of view. And the other thing I wanted to do was to try and strip away certain layers of the movement. So what happens if you perform movements which are meant to be done with expression, but you take away the expression? Does it sort of highlight the physical body more as opposed to the emotional aspect, or even the storytelling and the narrative aspect? What happens when you start to give external influences to the body, which is something that you never see in classical Bharatanatyam, where it is always, impetus from the dancer's body, and the dancer's movements are never kind of met with anything external in that sense. And therefore, working with two dancers, these are kind of the experiments which I started to do, in some senses, for me myself to get closer to understanding what is at the core, or what is at the center of the Bharatanatyam dancing body.
Thank you. And I think this is for me, it is very, very it's like I'm being taken on the same journey as the two dancers in the piece, because I can follow both the gestures actually and the technical form of the form being deconstructed somehow and shattered into different meanings, which are somehow towards the end brought together again with maybe a fresh and new being. I will look at the same dance but with new eyes, and the gesture, the mudras, we can call them mudras as it is the correct name, the hastas of the dance form is being broken up, and I love the middle part. I think it's towards the middle where you and Pooja are meeting. First, it is more scattered gestures. We can see them being presented, walking to and fro on the stage, just showing different gestures for us to. We can try to relate to them and to understand them, whether you are into this context or not, whatever pre-knowledge you have as the audience. But then later on, you start to connect them with being centered and starting to use the hasta mudras together, which is opening up for a like a big gesture, I would say. It is reaching out in a different way. Then also a little later on, you show the decoration. Pooja is putting on her jewelry, which is a scene commonly interpreted and shown in all Indian classical dance forms, I think. But we see it with a new perspective, and you are there also to support the gestures. It's very nice, the journey that you take us on. And also I'm very interested, I will also forward the question to Pauline, who is doing, who is premiering Margam, which is Margam, it's the path. I would love you, if you could explain a little about your thoughts. What was the intention for making this piece? Because it has similarities in a different way, to tune out of the clarity of the movement in Bharatanatyam and to search for something in between. Would you share some of this for us?
Yeah, to come back to your question you addressed also, I really feel like the power, the beauty of the form is really revealed finally when it's naked, the space is naked, and the ornaments are also removed. There is a beauty here that I perceived for the first time when I saw Chandalalika just presenting her company with just the half sari, and I just connected to that, to suddenly the aesthetic of what this form is about when it's removed. Otherwise, the sweet can become too sweet when there is a lot of layers that kind of hide just the beauty of that form. And in Margam, yes, I use the form as a vehicle, and I try to expose different things, and also the practice, as I've been going through this path of learning the form, going all the way to India, learning a form, coming back, what to do with this form. So it's the path of learning a practice. So I want to expose how it is demanding on the body, just the ayata or aramandi, this half plié, the kind of, and just to expose the breath, the demanding aspect of the practice that usually is masked when a performance is presented. So some aspects are kind of exposed in that sense, and yet the space in between movements that I was interested in, the silent, not to do anything on stage. I was interested to see what can it create. But again, it will become alive just tomorrow with a live audience. Now it's still the process is still until the last minute just occurring. But yeah, this silence between notes that create the music, between the movement that create the dance, between the thoughts. So I use the words as the thought process is also being exposed. So I can sum up, which is hard, but
thank you, Pauline. Yeah, it will be a pleasure to see it. We've been talking about it a little together, and what is going on in your mind in this. Thank you. I would like to forward to you, Sita, another question regarding this, how to deconstruct the form, or to look at it in another way, although it is the classical vocabulary of Bharatanatyam. In the Rite of Spring, which we have seen the behind the scenes only so far, but you can have quite a feeling of what is the language, the visual. For me, it is a very visual journey, together with the musical score, together with this very strong music piece of Stravinsky, which is also adding quite a new dimension to how I see the movements of Bharatanatyam. Suddenly, I don't look for the stamping feet anymore. I can see them. I look at them instead. The stamping, which is in Out of Bounds, for instance, it's very much a part of your work, the stamping, the rhythmic work of the feet. But in this Rite of Spring, I feel it is there, but it has been given a new dimension, a new how you look upon it. And also the way, the fluidity of the movements, how the dynamics, somehow I don't know if it is actually the movement in itself that changed, although it looks very, very fresh and very precise. But I think, could you tell us a little about how your thoughts about this choice of music, which is not at all referred to as normally used for Bharatanatyam traditionally, how it affected your way of organizing the movements, or how to even the mudras, the hand gestures. I find I look at them in a more like a bigger picture, like a outstretched mudra somehow, which is depicting the collective mind of the company and within this story. Could you please share that with us, Sita?
I'll try. I find the word deconstructed not really applicable for my Rite of Spring, partly because I haven't deconstructed the form. I'm trying to even like expand it. So I'm trying to, like, if it was a balloon, I'd blow into it and it would expand from the inside out, rather than changing it externally too much, or not externally, but I don't feel like I'm deconstructing it, because I feel like it's very constructed, in a sense that the movements connect in a way that I don't know. I think the music just lends itself to this expansion. So if you see a footwork and you really see these accents in the music, which in the Rite of Spring are very random. So in Bharatanatyam, it's very mathematical, and it's they're not predictable by any means, but there's a method within that. So even if you don't know what that composition of music is, you'll start to like know when a you'll like, there are patterns and things that you can connect to. Whereas the Rite of Spring is on its surface very random, and what that conveys is an unease. But then when the dancers and I worked so that they really understood when those things were going to come and what was happening, we deconstructed the music. It meant that they could accentuate it. So a stamp which is then accentuated by the music is just something even more, like, it's even bigger. But that's not really my preoccupation. I think I'm more interested in thinking, actually, it's Bharatanatyam is awesome, it's beautiful. I like it in its classical presentation as a solo form, and I struggled with enjoying ensemble work, and I don't really know why. I think the solo work that I'd seen and done really excited me so much and took me to new places in my mind, but group work seemed a bit of a I don't know, it was a disappointment when I often saw it. And so I thought, well, can I make something in a group that I would like to see? And you know, the more I'm dancing as I'm older, you know, as a mature dancer now, my body obviously, you know, I still want to push myself physically, but I get so much more enjoyment out of it when I'm more musical. And so within the rhythms and within the technique and the fullness of the movement, there's ways of breathing and connection that I just feel that I now, as a more mature dancer, enjoy dancing a lot more. So when I've created the movement in the Rite of Spring, because it wasn't a devised process, I basically created every step in the piece just because I wanted to challenge myself around that. It feels nice. So when I'm making the connections and I'm describing how I want the dancers to do it, like I really feel embodied in that practice, even though I'm not in the work. And so it was the choreography is more of a reflection of how do I enjoy dancing classical Bharatanatyam, so that I know that the technique and sitting in Aramandi and those things are painful and they hurt, but actually there's a breath that I'm finding as an older dancer because I have to, because my body is changing. And so within that, I find a deeper musicality, which then I want to, you know, I really enjoy seeing that, you know, in dancers, rather than them fighting for every single thing. They know how to ebb and flow with the music. And there's something very pleasing about watching dance that does that for me.
Thank you, Sita. It is good that you pointed out that this piece, I also don't feel it's about the deconstruction of Bharatanatyam, but more of the expanding the form, how it can be taken to another level of how you can experience the movements. For me, it was working like that. It was really interesting.
I mean, it's very small things. Like you'll see I don't think you can see it in the trailer, but you know, we do Attami, which is a movement of the neck. And we use the eyes often as well. And to change that to this, which is also a head movement that we have, but to do it in repetition, it starts to just, it creates, and then you see that in a group and you see all 5 heads doing this. And there's just a sort of like bubblingness of something happening, an expression or a bhava comes out of this group through the details we have in Bharatanatyam. So if everybody's doing this and they're trying to catch each other, this itself kind of makes me breathe high up in my chest, because I feel like something's going to happen, but I don't know what. And to see a group of 6 people playing a game where there's this, it no longer has a meaning of what this is, which might be beautiful, or it has a different context. But this is actually a movement we use in Bharatanatyam. This is exactly a movement. I don't want to change the carriage of the arm. I don't want to change the carriage of the posture, but you add a different kind of relationship with people in that, and you get a different expression that isn't about you going here and here. It changes. I wasn't keen on using Abhinaya in the group context because I find it very cheesy and twee. I had to find another way to convey narrative in the group that I didn't cringe at more than anything.
Yeah, thank you. It is quite powerful, these places, and I was also very. This picture of the head is very strong, and it gives the impact you are talking about. And I think this is somehow why I connected. I didn't know maybe in the beginning, but now I feel the connections in speaking with you and in writing my questions to you today. That we're seeing Pauline with this. It's a solo, although it's in a dialogue with a frame drum, which is also, it is not really a solo actually, but it is your body and your gestures. Maybe I'm wrong here, but somehow it has, it is something which is different to Rite of Spring in the sense of how we can multiply gesture, for instance. I'm very interested into these things, that's why I keep talking about it. But and then with Revanta's work, who is a duet, and how you connect the gestures and the movements within 2 bodies and how they can correlate and create new perspectives. I find it is wonderful to have these 3 different kind of perspectives somehow. I don't know right now how much time we have. We should probably let some. Yes. Are there some questions? We have our lovely chat moderator, Martha. No questions for now. Maybe it will pop in after some time. You will be able to watch this live. This stream will be still on Farhang channel, but the streams for the performances will be taken down on Monday. So you have still time to watch, a chance to watch this yesterday's program, where we could see glimpses of Rite of Spring and Revanta Sarabai, and also the very nice and interesting work, the dance film, A Very British Museum, which somehow it's another full discussion, I believe. So I took the decisions not to bring it up here like that, because it would open up to 3-hour discussion, I believe. It is a very nice, you should watch it. And Pauline, well, who are in Stockholm should really come to Teater Slava and see her work, the journey of looking into something new, into the space in between, and together with the frame drum. Maybe I should ask you to talk a little more about that collaboration with Maria, who is the musician, and the frame drum as an instrument.
Yeah, I was drawn to frame drumming since a while, and it came that it was the right time to just bring it on this project. And so I connected Maria, that I don't know, and that I will meet just in real life after this webinar. So one day before we premiere. So it's another way to collaborate also, and it's kind of actual, I guess, to this in these times. And yes, the frame drumming, as it brings this in a simple way and accessible, this lunar instrument that is played with fingers and quite intricate rhythm. But I felt a connection. It's quite I always wanted to apprehend, to be a musician in a way as a dancer, being frustrated sometimes not to be able to sing what I'm dancing properly, to be able to say the rhythm in tal as a percussionist would say. Like sometimes always the music I would have loved to dive in, and of course time. And so now I'm learning from her actually frame drumming, and I wanted her to be on board and to have this. We are in two bubbles, and at some time we will emerge at the end. So I wanted to include her in this piece, and she was enthusiastic without knowing me and knowing my work. So that's will be the surprise tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you. It will be very interesting. We have like 2 minutes left, I think, in this panel discussion, and I will just forward something that I was thinking. If you are not an audience with the pre-knowledge of